Chapter 365. At this moment, the people who came back were all outsiders. And just now Luo Laoforan had also told her some things that she didn't know. Those who came in included Jingwan's maternal grandmother, as well as her maternal aunt, who came to the capital a few months ago, as well as her maternal aunt's cousin who had not yet married. Her maternal aunt, whose face was thicker than the city walls, had named her third brother Luo Jingbua by name, and even righteously wanted to take her daughter as a concubine, vainly attempting to take the position of a second wife, and even relying on the status of a relative to be above the official wife. Also, her younger sister-in-law had designs on Li Hongyuan. But in the end, she was almost directly pressed into the river by Li Hongyuan's people and was killed. It wasn't that there weren't people who came to propose marriage because of Jingwan, attempting to climb up the ranks of Jin Qin Wang Fu in a roundabout way. Unfortunately, this maternal aunt didn't like the other party's family background at all. As for her younger sister-in-law, no one cared about her, dragging it out until now. Seeing that she was moving closer and closer to becoming an old lady, she still refused to leave the capital no matter what. Knowing that Jingwan didn't like them, they still shamelessly came to the Luo family's door today. It was nothing more than letting people see that they had a good relationship with Jin Qin Wang Fei, paving the way for the future. And the Luo family was worried that if they didn't let them in, they would cause a ruckus outside the door. At that time, the one who would lose face would not only be the Luo family, but also Jingwan. Of the three aunts, eldest aunt was naturally the most familiar with her, and had the best relationship with Yuan Xiaoqiao. Speaking of which, Yuan Xiaoqiao was already married, and her actions were quite swift. The main reason was that she had pushed it back until next year, as she was slightly older. Another reason was probably that eldest aunt really liked the man. He was the son of the governor of the capital. After all, Luo Peishan had been promoted to Minister of Appointments, Jingwan had become Jin Qin Wang Fei, and Yuan Xiaoqiao's father was in the Ministry of Appointments. It was impossible for her status not to rise. The man who came to propose marriage naturally had a better family background, so it was normal for eldest aunt to be satisfied. Second aunt's family also seemed to be shameless. On the day of Jingwan's coming-of-age ceremony, they also schemed against Luo Jingbua. In the end, they implicated Luo Jingming and directly angered old Madame Luo, who forbade them from coming to visit again. Today, they came to the Luo family because the Luo family didn't chase them away. As for third aunt, Jingwan really hadn't interacted with her alone before. She also hadn't interacted with her cousins in the family. Third aunt's temperament seemed to be a little indifferent to fame and fortune, and the children she brought up were more or less similar to her. Before the Lantern Festival of the first lunar month, the eldest cousin was pregnant again, and the second cousin also had good news. Now they were both out of confinement. The two babies were separated by 2 days, and they were both girls. The eldest cousin's first child was a boy, so it was not a big deal that it was a girl, but the cousin's in-laws were a little dissatisfied. However, with the Luo family's status, they did not dare to say anything on the surface. Because the child was young, they did not bring it along. These people basically came together. Although their expressions were as calm as possible, most of them were unable to express their emotions. Envy, jealousy, surprise could all be seen clearly. Not to mention, Madame Luo was an old and experienced person. She basically knew what was going on in a flash. What good things did Wan bring for grandmother today? Show me the gift list, Madame Luo said with a smile. The gift list for Madame Luo, and the Minister of Personnel Affairs, was already in the hands of Madame Luo's mother. When she heard Madame Luo's words, she hurriedly presented it with a smile. Madame Luo's eyesight was not bad. Opening the gift list, she understood. Sure enough, the gifts were too generous, causing these people to have different thoughts. Although the gifts given to her were definitely thicker than those of the other branches. With her understanding of Jingwan, she could also be sure that the other gifts would not be bad, even if it was the second branch that she had disagreements with. This granddaughter of hers, had never valued worldly possessions. In addition, Jin Qin Wang, who was diligently giving her good things, was probably still stuffing her with money to spend, so she probably did not care about these things. You want to empty out Jin Qin Wang Fu? Madame Luo tilted her head and asked Jingwan with a smile. How could I? I bought them all in Jiangnan. Wang Ye gave me a lot of banknotes and let me buy them for fun. As a result, I bought them all the way and accidentally bought too much. Jingwan said a little bitterly. When I bought them, I didn't take it seriously. After returning to the capital, I found out when I was tidying up. Wang Ye dotes on you, so don't take the money seriously. It's not like the wind blew it over. Grandmother, don't worry, it's just this time. It's just a coincidence. In the future, even if I want to squander it, I probably won't have the chance. Madame Luo nodded and did not say anything more. And these things, she accepted them with a clear conscience and did not feel that there was any problem. Then, whether it was those who wanted to say sour words or those who wanted to compliment, they all swallowed their words back into their stomachs. Today they would come to the Luo family. Jingwan did not think about it, but even if she thought about it, she would not bring the things she gave them to the Luo family. Afterwards, Jingwan talked with them. She could act coquettishly and foolishly in front of Madame Luo. In front of them, she could be easygoing, but she could not completely put down the airs of a Qin Wang Fei. If people felt that a Qin Wang Fei was no different from an ordinary woman in the inner residence who could say anything and still reprimand her like a junior, then it would damage Li Hongyuan's face, and even the dignity of the imperial family. Therefore, lowering herself was not something that could be done if she wanted to. If the relationship between them became too big, it was not something that could be won over with a few words. Yuan Xiaoqiao followed her mother and did not speak up at this time. At first, she was a little nervous and worried that the relationship between them would become distant. But after receiving a look from Jingwan, she was relieved. She secretly made a face and then lowered her eyebrows and hid her eyes, pretending to be obedient. Jingwan laughed secretly. Well, she thought that this cousin of hers had restrained her temperament after getting married. Sure enough, it was easy to change mountains and rivers, but hard to change a person's nature. It turned out that it was all a pretense. Except for that aunt's family and second aunt's family, Jingwan basically did not neglect the others. According to the relationship between them, she could more or less say a few words with a smile. Her attitude was just right, so that they did not dare to overstep their boundaries. They also did not feel that Jingwan had become arrogant and looked down on them because of her high status. She did not look like someone who had only been a Qin Wang Fei for a little more than half a year. As for those two families, Jingwan made it clear that she did not like them. She did not like them and had no interest in pretending to be magnanimous and forgiving. If you were magnanimous and forgiving, some people would only take an inch and want a mile. When she was talking to her two cousins, this child has been born. Why didn't someone send a message to me in Jiangnan? Eldest cousin's sister Luo Jingshu immediately smiled and said, Prince is on a business trip in Jiangnan. The Wang Fei has to serve Prince on the way. It is difficult to disturb him because of a junior. Eldest sister is right. That is the reason. Luo Jingqiang also smiled and agreed. It is a happy occasion to have a son in the family. How can there be a disturbance? In any case, their Wang Fei's aunt will definitely come back. This gift will definitely not be lacking. Jingwan smiled and nodded. When we return, I will double the 3 baptismal gifts and the full moon gift. See, it was right not to say this before. There are so many things, aren't there? Luo Jingshu teased. Everyone else also laughed. The atmosphere was quite harmonious, except for some places that were not harmonious. When the children are older, bring them to the prince's mansion to play. Let me take a good look at them. Daughters are like little cotton-padded jackets. Take good care of them. In the future, they will definitely be the best. Jingwan said meaningfully. Everyone was smart and naturally understood. Luo Jingshu tilted her head and glanced at Luo Jingqiang. She was still fine. She had a son by her side. This third younger sister wanted to support her second younger sister. However, there was another layer of meaning. As long as they were good girls, as long as their Wang Fei aunt was around, their future would not be bad. Giving a pile of good things, compared to promising their children a future, was actually nothing. It was very comforting. Naturally, her smile became more sincere. Luo Jingqiang also understood in her heart and was very grateful. As long as her daughter received a few good words from her aunt, her status would immediately rise. Those people in her husband's family would not dislike her. Instead, they would pamper and love her as if she was their precious treasure. Even her own status would be more stable. However, the prerequisite for a good future was a good girl. Whether it was in the past or now, they clearly knew that Jingwan was not a stingy person. She was willing to help her family if she could. However, if their character was not good enough, and they did something disgusting, then it would be embarrassing. Even if they met her face to face, she would not bother to say a word to them, let alone receive benefits from her. Therefore, it was very important for the children's upbringing. Regardless of whether those who had a bad relationship with Jingwan regretted it or not. In short, they were determined to teach their juniors well. As for the Luo family who were not present, they would definitely know what Jingwan meant. This would be a good start. Moreover, they would not know that the princess consort was just the beginning of Jingwan's marriage. In the future, she would be the mother of the world and become the most honorable woman in the world. As for the Luo family, they would be the only relatives. Even if they did not have a high position and high salary, their status was unparalleled. As the saying goes, if one could not climb up to the emperor, then he would naturally climb up to the empress. Climbing up to the empress was naturally to build a relationship with the Luo family, and marriage was still the most mainstream way to build a relationship. There were many high officials, nobles, and even members of the imperial family in the capital. As for the young masters and young ladies of the Luo family, there were definitely not enough. Then, those who were close to the Luo family, as well as those who were purely on good terms with Jingwan, would also be promoted to the top. In this way, even if their status was not high enough, as long as they got Jingwan's word, they would definitely not have to worry about a good marriage. If their character was not good enough, Jingwan would definitely not do things that would cheat people and create resentful couples. Of course, this was something that would happen more than 10 years later, so let's not talk about it for now. As they were gossiping, the masters of the Luo family gradually came over. The adults were still reserved and did not show too much emotion, but the younger ones were quite happy at this time. Jingwan had also prepared the gifts with great care. As long as it was a child, regardless of whether it was the previous generation or the next generation, she would give it to them. Although there were some differences in the status of the legitimate wife and concubines, the difference was not big. The other gifts were given to the husband and wife as a unit. Speaking of which, as the elders, they understood Jingwan's temperament. As the legitimate mother, perhaps when she saw Jingwan giving the concubines' children gifts, she had some thoughts in her heart, but she did not want to embezzle them. At this time, how stupid would she be to do such a thing? As for the third branch, Madame Lu's thoughts had faded. She wholeheartedly taught the legitimate son and took care of the legitimate daughter. She did not expect Luo Jingying to marry into a good family again. It would be good if she could spend the rest of her life in the Luo family. As for the younger concubine's children, Madame Lu did not treat them harshly. The eldest concubine's son, Madame Lu, also married Luo Jingming's wife into the family. Madame Lu treated this young lady of the Honglu Temple's officials' family with a relatively high status, but she did not make things difficult for her. She did not say that she was a good mother-in-law, but she definitely did not make things difficult for her. She just let the young couple live their own lives. The group of younger ones all smiled and thanked Jingwan. Older sister princess consort first, followed by older sister princess consort behind. The sweet-mouthed ones kept saying auspicious words, while the clumsy ones anxiously followed. The more anxious they were, the more they stuttered, making everyone laugh. The last one was Luo Jingda's eldest son. Although he could walk now, he was not very stable. He swayed from side to side, which was very amusing. He also did not want to be left out and walked forward. He followed the older one and vaguely called out, "Older sister princess consort." His mother, Madame Lu, followed by his side. She gently slapped his little butt and laughed. "Little brat, what are you saying? You should call princess consort aunt. Aunt, do you understand?" Jingwan reached out and picked up the little one. This child had always been weak when he was in his mother's womb. although the reason was found later. And he was not born prematurely. He was still relatively weak. After raising him for more than a year, he was now chubby and very cute. Princess consort, don't hold him. This little one is very active, and his skin is tough. Be careful not to hurt him. How could I? As a matter of fact, Jingwan was hugging him tightly. With her strength, how could she not be able to control the little guy? Madame Luo reached out and pinched the little one's chubby hand. Brother Rue is usually a little shy with strangers, but he is very close to Wan Wan. It has been more than half a year, but he still seems to remember. That's right. Our brother Rue doesn't remember anyone, but he can't forget Aunt Princess Consort. If it wasn't for Aunt Princess Consort, you little brat might not have been born, Madame Lu said with a smile. This was her precious baby. Every time she thought that he might be gone at that time, her heart would ache. That's right. That's our brother Rue's fate. Jingwan liked these simple and cute children very much. If they were really gone, she would definitely feel bad. Aunt. Brother Rue was happy in Jingwan's arms, and rubbed against her mischievously. Brother Rue also agrees with Aunt's words, right? Jingwan smiled, and could not stop kissing his little face. The little one held onto Jingwan's face, and kissed her back. This time, Madame Luo was amused. If your uncle sees you, you little brat, you will be punished. Jingwan was a lot more thick-skinned now, so she did not mind her grandmother's teasing. The others also laughed, including the little ones. Although they were not sensible, they were also laughing happily. It's so lively. Sun Yijia came in with her daughter, Sister Xian. Perhaps the little one saw the little brother, so she also stretched out her hand in a babbling voice. Oh, this little one also recognizes people. The people next to her laughed. Sun Yijia was straightforward and directly carried Sister Xian over. Thus, one on each side of Jingwan's legs. The two little ones were very familiar with each other, and were very affectionate with each other. Princess Consort likes children so much. When are you going to have two? If you ask me, I might have already been born. Even if Jingwan did not like them, they still did not want to be lonely, and wanted to make their presence known. However, when they heard this, Jingwan did not do anything, but the others were silent. Little Wang and Sun Yijia quickly reached out, and wanted to take the children back. If they were really born, the two children would make a fuss. What if something happened? Don't worry, it's fine. The mansion doctor in the mansion will check my pulse at any time. Besides, if there is something wrong with my body, I will be more or less aware. I am very good. However, because of her status, Jingwan did not continue to carry the two little ones. Since the children were returned, she did not mention this again, and did not mention it. After that, the third branch and the fourth branch arrived at almost the same time. This time, Jingwan naturally noticed the unfamiliar face, second sister-in-law Zhao. She was the legitimate daughter of the Honglu Temple. Although she was not very beautiful, she was still delicate and good-looking. She smiled before speaking, and seemed to have a good temper. I finally see second sister-in-law today. Greetings, Princess Consort. Zhao bowed. We are family. There is no need to be so polite. Qingzhu, who was serving at the side, quickly presented the box in her hand. Jingwan took it in her hand. When second sister-in-law married into the family, I was still in Jiangnan. This is a small gift from me. Second sister-in-law. I hope you don't mind. Jingwan did not know about other happy events, but she knew about this marriage. Although they had sent gifts back before the marriage, this meeting gift still had to be made up. Logically, Jingwan should be the one receiving the gift. However, her status was high, so she became the one giving the gift. Zhao quickly took it. Thank you, Princess Consort. I am so happy, how can I dislike it? Second sister-in-law looks like a good person. If second brother bullies you in the future, just tell me. I will help you deal with him. Zhao sure blushed and muttered. My husband treats me very well. As a bride who had just married into the family, she was naturally the target of everyone's teasing. For a moment, it was very lively and cheerful. However, Jingwan inadvertently noticed that little Wang's smile was a little forced. Obviously, she had something on her mind. After a while, Madame Luo dismissed everyone and asked them to do what they needed to do. I know you have a private room with Yijia and Xiao Xiao. Go go. Madame Luo waved at Jingwan impatiently. Jingwan held Madame Luo's arm. Grandmother, are you disliking your granddaughter? Mischievous. Madame Luo tapped her forehead. Go. Jingwan nodded with a smile. By the way, grandmother, I think something is wrong with eldest sister-in-law. What's the matter? Madame Luo's expression became indifferent. What can it be? The woman in your eldest brother's room is pregnant. No woman can be happy. Back then, when little Wang's pregnancy was unstable, she still said a few words. But now she was too lazy to care. If she didn't care about her son's room, who would have the patience to care about her grandson? Jingwan frowned slightly, and could only sigh. To be honest, even if he was her biological brother, she was already overstepping her boundaries by not allowing him to touch any woman other than third sister-in-law. There was no reason for her to care about her cousin. Grandmother, you can reveal that I don't like concubines. Madame Luo glanced at Jingwan and sighed. You are still the same. Jingwan didn't care. I can't help it. If I don't like it, I don't like it. No matter how many lifetimes it is, this won't change. Eldest sister-in-law is a good woman. If I can help a little, I will. I can't do anything more. However, if Wang Yemai likes and dislikes, it will probably affect some people's career. Madame Luo didn't doubt these words. If Jin Qinhuang's feelings towards his granddaughter didn't change, then whether it was for Jingwan or Jin Qinhuang himself, the more concubines there were in the inner court, especially those who favored the concubines and neglected the wife, they would definitely not be able to gain any advantage in front of him. Not to mention other things. Jin only guards one wife. What is the meaning of you courtiers hugging left and right? If his wife was unhappy, then he would cut them even more, cut them to death. https://11/11807/6654054. Mobile version reading website. Chapter 366. Since Wanwan has said so, then this old woman will meddle in other people's business again. Who asked this granddaughter to be the apple of her eye? Moreover, this granddaughter of hers was not only for her sister-in-law, but also for the Luo family. The Luo family did not seem obvious now, but in the future, if there were no accidents, it would not be an exaggeration to say that it would be like adding oil to a fire. Everything had to be done carefully. There were some things that were completely ignored now, but in the future, it would become worse, and it would be easy for others to take advantage of. Grandmother, I'll have to trouble you, but it's better not to kill anyone, no matter if it's a big one or a small one, especially this small one, because she has no right to choose. She is really innocent. In Jingwan's opinion, either she did not want to get pregnant, or if she did, she should not easily abort it. If it was because she had no choice, then it was fine. If it was purely for some kind of benefit, then it was ruthless. But if it was purely for some kind of evil, then it was absolutely unforgivable to let the woman suffer in the end. Do you think I don't know what you're thinking? Don't worry, this will be a lesson to him. If he is only afraid of affecting his future, then he will have a child and kill that Tongfang. This kind of person is not worth nurturing. Even if he can establish a household for a while, it won't last long. Jingwan suddenly thought of Patriarch Pei, who had worked hard all his life, putting benefits above all, and used the name of the family as a banner. In the end, before they returned to the capital, it was said that he was bedridden and could not get out of bed. That's enough, don't worry about these trivial matters. You're just doing chores in the prince's mansion, and you have a bunch of people to help you. Now that you're back at home, you're worrying about this and that. What's wrong with you? If the prince finds out, you might not be allowed to come back in the future. Old Madame Luo patted Jingwan's hand. Go. He dares. Jingwan stubbornly retorted. Whether he dares or not, you know best in your heart. Old Madame Luo teased. Jingwan immediately wilted. That bastard really dared. Although she usually had the final say. But once someone became unyielding, she really could not change his mind. Old Madame Luo's mocking expression became more and more obvious. People like Jin Qinhuang, from some of his actions and style, could be seen that he was an absolutely powerful person, with a strong desire for control. If he didn't want to make him listen to others for everything, It was simply a fool's dream. It was because she understood this point that old Madame Luo knew that he accommodated and pampered Jingwan's eyes. If one's mind was not firm, then one would be spoiled. If they were spoiled, their temperament would be different. To a certain extent, it would be easy for them to be annoyed by others. Then, all the love and affection might be taken away. It would be fine if they didn't get it in the first place, but if they got it, and it was mercilessly taken away, that would be a very cruel thing. No matter how a person's changes, even from one extreme to the other, if there was a person who remained the same from beginning to end, then that was an even more inconceivable thing. In this regard, old Madame Luo had never said anything to Jingwan. Firstly, even if this granddaughter was spoiled, she would not be that bad. Secondly, perhaps she was actually looking forward to seeing her granddaughter's spoiled appearance. The Haitang elegant residence was still kept. If there were no accidents, after 6 or 7 years, this courtyard would be given to Xianjier to live in. The so-called accident was that the 2 elders of the Luo family had both passed away in the past few years. The Luo brothers had split up, and the second branch had moved out of this residence. The possibility of this accident should be relatively small. However, Jingwan also pondered in her heart. Later on, she would let Gong Jiu come to the Luo family to take the 2 elders' pulse. Jingwan now had more and more trust in Gong Jiu's medical skills. When Jingwan arrived at the Haitang elegant residence, as expected, Sun Yijia and Yuan Xiaoqiao were waiting there. "Greetings, Wang Fei." The two pretended to greet her. It was clearly a very normal thing. But Jingwan suddenly felt as if she had been struck by lightning. "That's enough, you two. Are you deliberately making fun of me?" When the two heard this, they stood up straight and giggled. "You are now a proper Qin Wang Fei. As the saying goes, etiquette cannot be abolished. Alright, then you two can squat. Even if you kneel, I don't mind. In any case, I am a Qin Wang Fei. I can accept it. I'm not afraid of my lifespan being shortened." Jingwan brushed her sleeves and prepared to sit down. "I'm calling you fat and you're panting," Sun Yijia said as she made a move to pinch her. Jingwan hurriedly dodged, and the 3 of them laughed together. Because of their status, the gap between them disappeared without a trace. After a long while they sat down to talk. To tell the truth, when I saw Wan's previous appearance, I really felt that she wasn't on the same side as us. She was dignified and had style, making people not dare to act rashly. I'm really afraid that our relationship would become estranged. Yuan Xiaoqiao's heart was distressed. If it really became like that, it would be quite regretful. "You're thinking too much. We still don't know what kind of person Wan Mimi is. For the dignity of the imperial family and Jin Qinwang, on the surface, it should be maintained. In private, don't mention being a Qinwang Fei even. I think that Wan Mimi is still Wan Mimi. This point will never change." Sun Yijia adapted well. After all, she had interacted with many people in the imperial family. A lot of people might have changed, but some things would never change. Yuan Xiaoqiao didn't understand the ambiguous words that Sun Yijia used, but Jingwan was clear. This was just a metaphor. Or did the sister-in-law's best friend notice something? Sun Yijia just happened to meet Jingwan's eyes. She smiled and didn't say anything. Don't say, Sun Yijia's temperament now, whether it was internally or externally, was much gentler. If compared to before Jingwan knew her, those who didn't know would definitely think that they were 2 different people. She used to be proud, distant, and aloof. Now she was gentle, and did things straightforwardly. Perhaps she still didn't like to interact with people, but it didn't mean that she wasn't good at interacting with people. The second branch didn't care about the general affairs of the Luo family. Therefore she was still very idle. Most of the time, she would take care of her husband and children. When she went out for a very formal occasion, she would put on makeup to cover the scars on her face. When she was at home, she basically didn't wear any makeup. The Luo family members were used to it. Sun Yijia's relationship with the people and things of the past could be said to be very clean. Originally, because of her temperament, there were a lot of people who flattered and fawned over her, but there were basically no true friends. Her face was disfigured and she got married, but the husband she married didn't need her diplomatic relations. Those people naturally broke off completely. Her mother, Duke Furen, was still ill and couldn't get better. For the time being, there were no signs of death. She wanted to go back and take a look, but when she went back once or twice, her grandmother didn't even give her food and sent her away. She just wanted her to live her own life in peace. Don't look at, don't ask, and don't care about the troublesome things in Duke Dingua's mansion. Duke Dingua's mansion was really quite chaotic now. Because old Madame Sun was still alive, the brothers of Duke Dingua were all in the mansion. They all inherited the virtue of the old Duke Dingua. They were greedy and lustful, so naturally there were many children. Among the brothers of the older generation, sisters-in-law, and the brothers and sisters of the younger generation, cousins and cousins, there were also cousins outside. Without the master to hold the line, all of them wanted to compete for power and profit. The original contradictions instantly broke out 10 times, or 100 times. The men were busy with external affairs. Not only were they fighting with other factions, but they were also doing their best to be in power. Not to mention other things, Sun Yijia's eldest brother, because Sun Yilin was not around, wanted to completely control Duke Dingua's mansion. Who knew that the second brother, who had always been very weak, suddenly appeared. He was originally a quiet person, but he didn't expect that he also held a lot of power. The brothers fought against each other like fire and water. If they didn't fight to the death, they would never let it go. After Sun Yijia got some news, she didn't care anymore. Anyway, in her opinion, Duke Dingua's mansion would be finished sooner or later. It was good enough that the Sun family could still maintain their status as a third-class family. It could be said that she sighed again, and again that she was lucky. Her husband was ambitious. The most important thing was that he was not fickle in love. He was very good to her and the children. When a woman got married, it was like a second reincarnation. That was all she wanted. Sun Yijia felt that she had nothing more to ask for in this life. Of course, she still lacked a son. She just needed to take care of her body for another year and have another child. Even if she didn't have a son in the end, it might be a little regretful. But her life could be said to be perfect. Just by looking at your face, I can tell that you must be living a very good life. I'm too lazy to ask if you're doing well. We don't have the chance to go to Jiangnan. What fun is there? Jingwan brushed away Sun Yijia's hand. What are you doing? If you have something to say, let's talk nicely. Don't hit me. Where did you learn this from? You're always pinching people's soft flesh. What kind of behavior is that? Sun Yijia sneered and grabbed Jingwan's hand. She even pinched Jingwan's face before she stopped. Your face is as thick as my daughter's. Well, it turned out that the reason for her cheap hands was because the children were too soft and tender. Therefore, she developed the habit of touching and pinching people's faces. Yuan Xiaoqiao's line of sight fell on Jingwan's exposed arm. She grabbed it and pulled up the sleeve. On the snow-white and delicate skin, there were red plum blossoms. What is this? What is it? That gaze was as if she had caught hold of something big. She was excited and excited. Jingwan was speechless at these two girlfriends who were becoming more and more strange. Married people don't know what this is. You don't have it on your body. Yuan Xiaoqiao choked on Jingwan's words. She coughed. I do have it, but it's not as exaggerated as yours. Jin Qinwang really likes Wan Mimi. I can finally rest assured. Sun Yijia acted as if she was marrying off her daughter. She was somewhat gratified and somewhat melancholy. I say, you two, that's enough. Sure enough, unmarried girls were pure and innocent. After marriage, they all became vulgar. Okay, I won't tease you anymore. Hurry and tell us about Jiangnan's scenery. Compared to before, Jingwan was more detailed now. Her attitude was also more casual. After all, they were of the same age. Moreover, they were close friends. It was fine as long as the person who should understand it understood. Actually, life now is very good. It's something I didn't even dare to think about in the past. Therefore, I'm very satisfied. Although I have some yearning for the outside world, I don't have to go. There's still more than a year before the next examination. It's better for your third brother to stay in the capital to prepare for the examination. After all, he has grandfather to guide him. Also, your third brother spends a lot of time on painting. This arrangement is good. If you want to go out and have a look, you can wait until your third brother leaves. Yes, Sunny Jia wasn't greedy. She really cherished what she had. I've painted some paintings. When you go to the prince's mansion calling Shuang, I'll show you. Naturally, the two nodded happily. Speaking of Shuang, how is she recently? She's nurturing the baby. She's been pregnant for about 6 months. She's put on a lot of weight. Jingwan chuckled. She's been gone for half a year. She's met with so many happy things. It couldn't be better if they were all happy things. When it came to children, it was inevitable that the topic would come back to Jingwan. However, before they could speak, Princess Consort, missing requests an audience. A servant reported, missing. Jingwan was confused. Where did this missing come from? Luo Xiying is an orphan in the clan. Didn't fourth sister die of an illness in Prince Rui's mansion? Third aunt lost her beloved daughter and wanted to adopt a girl from the clan to relieve her lovesickness. Unexpectedly, there was a girl in the clan who looked very similar to fourth sister. People would believe that they were twins. Coincidentally, this girl didn't have parents and relied on the clan to survive. Third aunt brought her back and raised her by her side. She changed her name to Xiying. Sunny Jia explained. Jingwan immediately understood. Sure enough, third aunt was worried about Luo Jingying being outside. As expected, she used the simplest method to bring Luo Jingying back to her side. Jingwan wasn't surprised that she came to see her. In fact, Luo Jingying was among the gifts she prepared. Please come in. Princess Consort, missing is afraid of strangers. Does that mean that you can move? What is this? She is just a commoner. She came to visit the Princess Consort and asked the Princess Consort to move. How shameless must she be to do such a thing? Yuan Xiaoqiao said indignantly. Obviously, she didn't know the truth. However, this matter involved the reputation of the imperial family. It was best not to know. She believed that there were only a few people in the minister's mansion who knew about this. It's not a big deal. Maybe this girl is really a little timid. I'll just go and take a look. It seemed that Luo Jingying had something to say to her, but did not want others to know. Seeing Jingwan get up and leave, Yuan Xiaoqiao pursed her lips. Even if Wan is a princess consort, she is still like this. Alright, since you know, there's no need to say more. Sun Yijia's thoughts were similar to Jingwan's. In the begonia house, there was a small pavilion not far from the courtyard. When Jingwan arrived, Luo Jingying was already waiting there. When Luo Jingying saw Jingwan, she stood up and greeted her politely. No need to be so polite. Have a seat. Jingwan looked at her. Although she was still dressed as a girl, she had changed a lot. As long as people didn't know the truth, no matter how similar they were, they wouldn't think that she and Luo Jingying were the same person. She used to be so flamboyant, but now she was plain and even dull. She looked a little lethargic, and didn't have the vigor and vitality that people her age should have. She looked like a living dead person. Jingwan sighed in her heart. Luo Jingying was hateful in the past, but the damage she caused was limited. She had already committed suicide in front of her once. Selfishly, she let bygones be bygones. Of course, the premise was that she didn't do it again. Otherwise, there was no way she could be forgiven. Fourth sister, why did you want to see me? Although I look like Princess Consort's fourth sister, I don't deserve to be called by Princess Consort. Did she have to completely deny her past? Then I'll call you Xiying. If there's anything you want to say, just say it. Luo Jingying was silent for a moment. She probably didn't expect Jingwan to accept it so easily. If the others weren't like her mother, they would talk endlessly or ignore her. She looked at Jingwan quietly. In fact, until now, she didn't understand why there was someone like Luo Jingwan in the world. How could she forgive others so easily? I heard that Luo Jingying used to target you and scheme against you. How could you forgive her? Jingwan laughed. Even now she was still fussing about this. It's just a child's quarrel. Moreover, it's your own life. Whether you want to live a happy life or let some messy things and negative emotions disturb your life, the choice is in your own hands. So, in the end, you still don't care about such a small person. Was she going down a dead end again? How she is has nothing to do with you Xiying. Or is it because third aunt treated you as her substitute, and you're not happy? Third aunt aside, Luo Jingying is Luo Xiying and Luo Xiying is Luo Xiying. If you think so, Then why did you let the Luo Jingying of the past interfere with the current Luo Seeing? Seeing, you understand what I mean, right? Luo Jingying still looked at Jingwan quietly. Then, tears rolled down unconsciously, and she hurriedly wiped them away. In fact, she hadn't cried since she woke up from her coma after committing suicide. No matter how hard her mother hugged her and cried, no matter what she said, no matter how sorry she was, or how she would take good care of her in the future, she didn't feel anything. Now tears fell easily. She denied her past, but only verbally. Her heart was still brooding. Otherwise, if she really denied it and let it go, she wouldn't be like this now. Thank you, Your Highness. Her mother only said the same things over and over again. If it happened once or twice, she might be moved, but if it happened too many times, she would be annoyed. Her mother asked her to forgive her, but how could she forgive her? Even if her mother was wrong, it was just some of the ideas she had instilled in her. But she also knew that she was the one who caused the situation in the end. The more she said, the more she would hate herself and be angry with her mother. In the past, she would make a big fuss, but now, she maintained absolute silence. It turned out that she could actually completely let go in exchange for a complete new life. I had a dream. I dreamed of Luo Jingying. She said that she owed Your Highness an apology and a thank you. She also hoped that Your Highness would be safe and have a smooth life. This humble girl will take her leave. Jingwan nodded. You too. Luo Jingying left. As for whether she would truly be reborn, it was up to her. Jingwan returned to the inner courtyard. Sun Yijia and Yuan Xiaoqiao were chatting. When they saw her, they asked, "She left so quickly?" It was just a matter of a few words. She naturally left after saying that. Jingwan sat down. What happened in the capital in the past 6 months? Actually, it's nothing much. It's probably because of what happened in Jiangnan that His Majesty didn't go to the Summer Palace. In any case, because His Majesty was in a bad mood, the imperial court and the imperial harem were all covered in dark clouds. Speaking of which, it has nothing to do with us. And people like grandfather, who didn't get involved in such matters, were also very calm. What's more interesting is that their concubines are all from opposing factions. For example, Prince Rui's 2 concubines. One is from a closely connected family of Duke Ding's manor by marriage. The other is from the Marquis Champion's manor, and is Princess Gong's younger cousin. Prince Kang's concubine is the niece of the right commander-in-chief Shen Shuhan. The other concubines are basically in similar situations. The one with the least impact is probably Prince Wu. After all, because of his weak body, he didn't interfere with the imperial court's matters at all. Thus, it doesn't matter which family he marries. Speaking of which, these Wang Ye left the position of concubine largely because they wanted to rope in connections through marriage at crucial times. Now they were lifting a stone and smashing it on their own feet. It's a pity that those concubines have purely become the family's abandoned children. And as people from opposing factions, their husbands can't possibly treat them well. Those who have a bit of conscience may be raised as ornaments in the inner courtyard. Encountering those who fly into a rage out of humiliation and take their anger out on them. Who knows what kind of state they will be trampled on? Jingwan's voice was indifferent. In her heart, she hated Lu Qingdi's way of doing things. This way of doing things, other than harming those innocent women, could it have the effect of a copper coin? Even if the method of using in-laws to rope in people was curbed, there would still be other methods. Did he really think that his sons would be obedient? Isn't that so? Sun Yijia's heart was distressed. Wan, now that you're back, will His Majesty also directly appoint 1 or 2 concubines for Prince Jean? No matter what, Prince Jean is her most beloved son. She can't favor one and discriminate against the other. Yuan Xiaoqiao looked at Jingwan with some worry. Prince Jean cursed his wife. With that fate of his, it's already not bad to be able to meet Wan Mimi. Forget about those women with low status in the past. They don't have any status. Among the noble ladies, he still wants to hug them left and right? Dream on. With a wife like Wan Mimi, if he still does something to let Wan Mimi down, he should be struck by lightning. Sun Yijia's expression was cold. Yuan Xiaoqiao was a bit surprised by Sun Yijia's sudden change in attitude. Yijia, you have an opinion about Prince Jean? Although his reputation was bad before, After he was engaged to Wan Wan, there didn't seem to be any news of him having an affair with other women. Now, it seems that he's treating Wan Wan quite well. Can't we slightly change our view of him? I don't have an opinion about him. I have an opinion about Wan Mimi's husband. As Wan Mimi's husband, no matter how much he does, it's not enough. No matter how well he does, it's not good enough. Don't mention Yuan Xiao Xiao. Even Jingwan was a bit speechless. What was this? It seemed that she didn't have such high expectations for her own husband. You don't have to worry. If there really is such a matter, we will deal with it. At this moment, Jingwan thought of another matter. She vaguely knew where she was wrong. She rubbed her temples somewhat helplessly. To have such a husband, it was really a sweet burden. A certain person always wanted her to do something from time to time to prove that she cared about him. Was this a lack of security or what? It shouldn't be possible that he didn't have a sense of security. After all, in this kind of background, she didn't have a choice. She couldn't get a divorce, and she couldn't have a second spring. As long as he didn't let go, she could only be held in the palm of his hand. In the countryside, there might be cases of married women eloping with others. For someone like her, if she dared to do that, on the surface, she wouldn't exterminate the family for the sake of face. But behind the scenes, she would definitely kill your entire family. Not to mention that the success rate of eloping was extremely low. Even if it was successful, she would still be able to find you at the ends of the earth. Therefore, the one who didn't have a sense of security was a woman, not a man. Even now, she wouldn't feel insecure, okay? Therefore, it was purely his heart's paranoia. Thinking of all these, Jingwan hooked the corner of her mouth and laughed to herself. That man was really becoming more and more attractive. What are you thinking about that you're laughing like this? Sun Yijia couldn't help but want to pinch her. Jingwan brushed away her hand. Go to one side, go to one side. Is there anything else? That smile on the corner of her mouth couldn't be suppressed. The two people at the side looked at each other. With such amorous feelings, it would be strange if there was no problem. It seemed that Jin Qinwang treated her better than they expected. That's fine. They didn't need to worry about it. The other matter, it's probably that the Zhong Qinwang Fu caught fire and suffered heavy casualties. Wan Fangfei was directly burned into charcoal, and the other two Zifei of the Zhong Qinwang also lost their lives. It's just that one died on the spot, and the other held on for a few more days. The Zhong Qinwang himself could be considered lucky, but his injuries were also very serious, and he is still recuperating. As for the many heirs of the Zhong Qinwang Fu, only 2 or 3 were saved, but they were basically infertile. Jingwan's breathing stopped. It was man-made. If it was just an accident, how could the casualties be so heavy? Many people thought so, but after investigating, they couldn't find the real culprit. In the end, they had to settle this matter as an accident. Jingwan slightly frowned. This matter was obviously problematic, and Jingwan's first reaction was that it was Wan Fangfei's doing. However, Wan Fangfei was trapped in the backyard of the Zhong Qinwang Fu, and was all alone. Did she have the ability to drag the entire Zhong Qinwang Fu down with her? That one of her family definitely knew about this matter, but didn't tell her. She had to go back and properly ask. Is there anything else? Jingwan then asked, putting this matter aside for the time being. Other than that, it's just some trivial matters. It's nothing more than this family marrying off their daughter, that family marrying off their wife, and so on. Jingwan nodded. She felt that she should go back and directly ask the shadow guards who stayed in the capital. They definitely knew more than these 2 close friends' family members, and were clearer about it. After saying so much, time actually slipped away very quickly. Xianjie began to look for her mother. Although Xianjie was younger than Ruiji by half a year, she didn't weigh much less. However, because her body was very fleshy, she didn't look very fat. Her pair of big eyes were like 2 juicy grapes, looking exceptionally lively. Jingwan didn't hug her again. After all, she had a lot of accessories on her body, and was very active. She was worried that she would hurt her, so she held Xianjie's little hand and played with it. Previously, when talking about children, she wanted to ask Jingwan about it, but because of Luo Jingying, she changed the topic. Is there really no movement in your belly? Yuan Xiaoqiao stared at Jingwan's belly and said quite bluntly, "You've been whispering sweet nothings to each other for half a year. How come you're not pregnant?" Jingwan rolled her eyes at her. "I'll only be 16 in the second month after the new year. What's the hurry? Besides, now is not the time." Sun Yijia understood immediately. It seemed that some of her guesses were most likely correct. She was now in the Luo family. Grandfather had been teaching her husband and several uncles attentively, and had more or less revealed some things to them. Luo Jingbo basically didn't hide anything from her. According to Sun Yijia's intelligence, she would more or less find some clues. Jingwan's words were basically a kind of affirmation. It was better to be closer to the person who sat on the throne. Jingwan glanced at her, and the two of them smiled tacitly. Yuan Xiaoqiao, however, was still confused. Did she have to deliberately choose the time to give birth to a child? Time passed by just like that. When it was time for lunch, it was lively, but there was no trouble. After lunch, Jingwan threw her husband aside and took an afternoon nap in old Madame Luo's room. After waking up, she spent another 2 hours with old Madame Luo until Li Hongyuan couldn't bear it anymore and personally came to old Madame Luo's room to catch her. Jingwan took the initiative to hold his hand in front of the elders and pacified him, so he didn't lose his temper. However, Li Hongyuan still said goodbye with a cold face. Old Madame Luo saw this and was quite amused. The rumored dissolute and playboy was actually infatuated. She had to say that it was quite unexpected. "You've been back for so long, it's about time. After all, Wang Ye's identity is different. It's not good to stay for too long. Wan and Wang Ye should go back early. If you really miss them, you can come back in a few days. Now that we've just returned to the capital, there are so many eyes watching us. It's not good to stay for too long," Li Hongyuan said patiently. Jingwan glanced at him. He didn't mean what he said. This man clearly wanted her to completely forget about her family and only have him in her heart. "Then we'll go back first. But if there's anything, grandmother must send someone to tell me." "Okay, I know. You're such a worrisome girl. You should worry more about Wang Ye." Li Hongyuan nodded. That's right, what she said was really right. The people in the residence gathered together to respectfully send them off. Outside the gate, just as they were about to get into the carriage, Jingwan suddenly turned around. "Mother! Awan! Wang Fei, what orders do you have?" Everyone could see that Madame Zhang had something to say to her. On the way out, her eyes were always on Jingwan. Based on how shallow her tears were, it was already not easy for her to not cry until now. "Mother, after a while, the early plum blossoms in falling plum house will bloom, right? At that time, can you cut a few for me and send them to the Wangfu? Father won't feel bad, right?" Madame Zhang naturally agreed, because Luo Rongyan was a man. Even if he was her biological father, he didn't have the opportunity to talk to Jingwan. How could he refuse his daughter when she wanted something? Not to mention a few plum blossoms, he couldn't wait to give the entire tree to her. However, Luo Rongyan also knew that his daughter didn't want plum blossoms. What she wanted was affection. There was some estrangement between them and her. Now that Jingwan was willing to mend it, it was naturally good. "When the time comes, Father will personally cut them for you." Jingwan nodded with a smile and said a few words to her brothers and sisters. The three of them were a little excited. After all, Jingwan wasn't close to them. Moreover, her status was high now, so they didn't dare to look for her. After getting into the carriage, Li Hongyuan naturally hugged Jingwan in his arms. At first, he was quiet and didn't speak. After about 10 minutes, Li Hongyuan softly said, "Father-in-law has the talent to be an official." Jingwan was a little confused. "Father-in-law came to talk to me before and asked me some questions. Then, I realized that father-in-law is quite keen on official matters. If he is determined to become an official, then he will definitely not be below your grandfather in the future." Jingwan was a little surprised at first, then she became silent. After a moment she said, "Grandmother said that father is actually the most intelligent of the brothers. Father was even prepared to be an official successor that grandfather wanted to cultivate. However, later on, father was really not interested in official matters. He doesn't like to fight against each other. He doesn't like to deal with those people in the officialdom. He can't be considered a pure scholar. He likes to be romantic and fiddling with gold and stone objects. If he wants to be an official, it will probably be because of me. In Jingwan's eyes, her father was a person who liked romance, pursued casual pursuits, and was indifferent to fame and fortune. It's enough for you to have me. You don't need him to support you. He can continue to be carefree. Jingwan laughed. Father is actually very stubborn in his bones. I heard that when he didn't want to follow grandfather's path, grandfather didn't indulge him in the beginning. The father and son fought for a long time, but grandfather compromised in the end. Although grandfather still cared about the younger generation's own wishes, it is enough to show that father is a person who can't turn back once he has made up his mind. If he has really made up his mind, even if you and I persuade him, it will be useless. In that case, let him be. What he is doing now is not obvious. He will slowly climb up. In the future, there will be a time for him to show his skills. Anyway, as long as he is a talent, it doesn't matter who he uses. This prince's father-in-law will do his best. Naturally, it will be easier to use him. Why not? Therefore, even if it was his father-in-law who dared to steal his wife's attention, he couldn't blame him for being ruthless. Moreover, it was his father-in-law who sent himself to his door. His wife couldn't say that he didn't treat his father-in-law as a person, but as an animal. Along the way, the two of them were whispering sweet nothings into each other's ears when suddenly, a woman's sobbing voice came from outside. It was filled with hidden bitterness and tenderness. Your Highness, come out and see this servant, okay? This servant misses you, really misses you. I beg you. This servant just wants to see you one last time. This way, this servant can die in peace. Your Highness. Jingwan raised her head and looked at Li Hongyuan faintly. The woman outside, is she calling you Your Highness? Li Hongyuan didn't feel guilty at all. Probably. One of the 7 days of favor? Perhaps. Li Hongyuan even leaned back to find a more comfortable position. Then, does Your Highness want to say something? What should I say? Isn't this Wan's matter? This prince doesn't need to remind Wan of this kind of thing again and again. https://11/118076654058. Mobile Edition. Chapter 367. Right now it was a relatively lively road. Since the woman started to block the road, there were many people who stopped in their tracks, with a strange excitement and agitation. After all, as ordinary people, they had a strong curiosity about all kinds of gossip about people of different social classes. This would often become a topic for them to talk about. Perhaps at some point, their saliva would splatter everywhere. But because there were guards opening the way, those people did not dare to get too close. After learning from some insiders that this was Jin Qinhuang's carriage, many people's hearts were filled with fear. It was enough to see that Jin Qinhuang's prestige was very popular among the common people. However, today, Jin Qinhuang Fei was returning to her maternal home. Jin Qinhuang might not be in the carriage, but Jin Qinhuang Fei would definitely be there. Inexplicably, some people became excited again, as if they were injected with chicken blood. What fear was temporarily thrown to the side. There were only 2 words floating in their minds: big show. It could be said to be calling for thousands of times. Of course, they only dared to say it in their hearts. The curtain of the carriage was finally lifted. These ordinary people had never seen Jin Qinhuang Fei before. But looking at this imposing manner, she should undoubtedly be Jin Qinhuang Fei. Not to mention other things, just seeing the true face of a Qinhuang Fei was enough to show off for a while. She was beautiful and was different from them. She looked gentle and soft, kind and amiable. This kind of woman, as long as it was a man, they would be willing to take good care of her. They only dared to think about it, and would never have any blasphemous thoughts. But how would Jin Qinhuang Fei deal with this matter? They were afraid that she would suffer a loss. However, when this Qinhuang Fei opened her mouth, it was completely different from what they had expected. Most people's hearts were only left with astonishment, followed by fear. When Jingwan's voice fell, the people who had a good impression of her immediately changed. Vicious femme fatale. One may know a person's face, but not their heart and so on. A dignified Qin Wang Fei unexpectedly did not have the capacity to tolerate people. She was just a woman who had once served Qin Wang. Even if she was not happy and did not want to see her, she could just send her away. But when she opened her mouth, she wanted a life and regarded a life as grass. This kind of person was in a high position, who knew how many people would die in her hands. Qin Wang Fei. Woo woo woo. Jingwan had spoken. The guards naturally would not be polite. It should be known that these people, other than carrying out orders, did not have a heart of stone. Protective feelings for the fairer sex? What the hell was that? As for the beauties, Jingwan didn't give them a second glance. She still had that faint smile on her face as she glanced around. Just one glance was enough to make everyone shudder out of fear. It was as if they said another word, or even if they had any bad thoughts, she would immediately know. Then, like that woman, they would be fed to the fish in the moat. Jingwan had expected the consequences of doing such a thing in public, but it didn't matter. The man in the carriage had done many things to make her happy. In that case, why couldn't she do something to please him? But speaking of human lives, Jingwan looked back at eunuch Mu. Her meaning could not be more obvious. In the past, a certain someone didn't know what was going on with those women, but as his number one lackey, he definitely knew about this kind of thing. He even had the account book. Eunuch Mu trembled under Jingwan's gaze. Qin Wang Fei, His Highness has given this woman to. He quickly recalled in his mind. Who did he give her to? Who did he give her to? It had been a long time, and there were too many things that he had to remember. How could he remember such things? However, since the princess consort had asked, he had to think hard even if he couldn't remember. He had to remember quickly. Although eunuch Mu remained calm, Jingwan knew that he couldn't remember it. She's not from the villa? Qin Wang Fei no. Eunuch Mu was very sure about this. In that case, find out who he gave her to. Send her back, and tell him that I'm very angry about it. Her seemingly careless tone made eunuch Mu feel inexplicably terrified. He had an illusion that he was facing the king of hell. Was it true that one was marked by the company one kept? No. Qin Wang Fei was such a kind person. Would she become the same as His Highness in the future? Thinking of that scene, a living king of hell was enough to make people suffer. If there was a king of hell's wife, would they just kill themselves? Because it was too horrible. Muan, what are you thinking about? Or did you not hear what I said? Do you need me to repeat it? Jingwan said with a smile. Eunuch Mu only felt more chill in his heart. It was even more horrible than His Highness speaking with a cold face. Qin Wang Fei, I heard it clearly. You don't need to repeat it. Very good. Do it quickly. Jingwan stroked her sleeves indifferently, turned around and entered the carriage. Then she saw the living king of hell, who supported his cheek with one hand and smiled extremely seductively. Jingwan felt helpless and amused. She walked up, leaned over, put her forehead against his and whispered, Are you satisfied? Li Hongyuan reached out and put his arm around Jingwan's waist. With a little force, he pulled Jingwan into his arms. Wan, what are you saying? If someone wants your husband, shouldn't you get rid of them all under normal circumstances? But at this time, it's not a matter of whether I'm satisfied or not, but whether you're satisfied or not. Wan, you're protecting your own interests. It was not the first time that Jingwan had learned someone's virtue of pretending to be obedient after getting benefits. As long as you're happy. So Wan is not happy. You're the one who should be happier. Yes, I'm very happy. I'm very happy. It was not because she got rid of her rival in love, but because of this man. She put her arm around his neck, and the tip of her nose intimately rubbed against the tip of his nose. Then she kissed his lips without hesitation. The tip of her tongue slid open his lips and knocked open his teeth. After being married for more than half a year, she was often pulled by someone who was good at kissing to practice. Even if Jingwan was not perfect, she was at least 70 or 80%. It was more than enough to take the initiative once in a while. Li Hongyuan narrowed his eyes. Although he did not know what touched his little heart, his wife was so active and enthusiastic. It was a rare benefit. How could he not enjoy it? His eyes were unusually soft. He just catered to Jingwan's movements and did not take back the initiative. However, Jingwan was still a little weak in this aspect. In the end, she was the one who was panting. The corners of her eyes were slightly red. She buried her head on Li Hongyuan's shoulder, relaxed her body softly, and calmed her breathing. Li Hongyuan's desire was obviously aroused by her. But it was not a good time to continue doing anything. Li Hongyuan stroked her back again and again. When Jingwan regained her calmness, she straightened up and looked at Li Hongyuan with a smile. Prince, there are some debts. Shouldn't we settle them? Originally, it was very hurtful to bring up old debts. Even if she was unhappy, there was no way to change the past. So it was best to let it go. However, if she did not bring it up, the person who was carrying a debt would be unhappy. Fine, she would settle it properly. Once it was settled, it would be clear whether he would be more unhappy or not. At that time, it would be clear at a glance. Then, she would just treat it as a kind of pleasure. Oh, what does Wan want to settle with your husband? Li Hongyuan might have cared about the dark history in the past, thinking that it might not be easy to explain to his wife. But now, TSK, he couldn't be any calmer. It even became an excuse for him to trouble Jingwan. It was clearly his fault, but he was more righteous than anyone else. Come, let's talk about your 7 days of love first. What do you mean, what's the matter? It's just that. It's such a simple thing. Wan is so smart. Do you still need to explain it? Jingwan gritted her teeth. This bastard. Oh, so there's no deeper meaning. So, a Yuan is not an ordinary person who likes the new and hates the old. Wan's words are wrong. Your husband has nothing to do with the phrase like the new and hate the old. Once I've decided on someone, I'll start to like her from the new time. And then I'll continue to like her, no matter how old she is. And in my eyes, she will always be new and will never fade. Li Hongyuan held Jingwan's face with one hand, and his eyes were unusually gentle. I like the new and hate the old because, no matter if it's new or old, it can't arouse your husband's attention at all. Jingwan was almost charmed again. Bringing up old debts could make him express his loyalty in disguise. It was really enough. Oxhead despised her. Then she looked at Li Hongyuan. This bastard was actually laughing. He was clearly laughing at her weak willpower and being so easily charmed by men. Jingwan opened her mouth and took a hard bite. Hiss. Li Hongyuan seemed to suck in a breath of cold air and looked very painful. Jingwan really thought that she didn't have a sense of propriety. She quickly reached out to rub it. Pure concern made her confused. She didn't think that it wasn't the first time that she had bitten him until he bled. For example, it happened last night. In fact, it just made a beast more beastly. Could it be more serious than that? Li Hongyuan held her hand. Wan, don't rub it. He seemed to groan in pain. It's so serious. It's obviously. Well, it's very serious, very serious. Li Hongyuan's eyes became more and more serene. Jingwan realized in hindsight. Her face turned red and black. Without saying anything, she continued to bite him to death. Good darling, don't bite. It's really serious. It's so serious that you can't get out of the carriage for at least 4 hours. Li Hongyuan grabbed her waist and pressed her close to him. Look at it yourself. What have you become? Good darling. You have to know that one look from you can make it react. You deliberately seduced it and didn't appease it. Aren't you trying to take your husband's life? How can this situation not be serious? If Wan moves again, your husband will think that Wan is going to appease it in the carriage. Jingwan really gritted her teeth. But when she felt the obvious hardness and faint heat, she didn't dare to move again. Although Li Hongyuan's body was a little uncomfortable, he was in a good mood. He kissed Jingwan, who was lying in his arms but was unusually obedient. Are you done with the accounts? If not, then continue. Jingwan coldly sneered. The key is not whether you care or not. The key is that the things you don't care about actually existed. Oh, this is indeed a problem. But it's already an unchangeable fact. What should we do? In addition to the ones raised in the courtyard, there are also some that were given away. In any case, they are all unwanted. If others like them, they can save some rations. Li Hongyuan's tone was as if he wasn't talking about people, or even objects. Therefore, it was good to appear in the life of the living king of hell, and be chosen by him. Even if it was just a little, in any sense, it could be considered lucky. As for the rest, it was fine if they didn't have feelings for him. But if they did, then it was destined to be the greatest tragedy. Jingwan thought that she was the luckiest one out of all of them. She got his attention, got his feelings, and got his everything. However, in Li Hongyuan's heart, the luckiest one was herself. It was she who let him know that in addition to benefits, schemes, and harm, there was also warmth and selflessness. There were also things that made people sentimental. These things gave him a new lease of life. It even gave him a second chance in life, prevented the tragedy, and had no regrets. Ah Yuan, your possessiveness is so strong. How can you tolerate your beauties under other people's bodies? Li Hongyuan abruptly lowered his head and pinched Jingwan's chin, forcing her to raise her head. His eyes became unusually dangerous. Wan, do you think that in this world, as long as a woman has a bit of beauty, no matter what background or status, they can touch Ben Wang's body? Is it not so? Jingwan knew that he was angry, but she continued to stroke the tiger's whiskers, innocently blinking her eyes. According to the rumors, as long as it's a beauty, no matter if it's a good background or a lowly one, no matter if it's a pure body or a mortal body, sisters are too common. Mother and daughter are the real beauties. Even if Jin Qinwang destroys a family, he still wants to get his hands on them. Li Hongyuan approached her, his warm breath brushing against her face. He gently sniffed, like the top predator, confirming the delicious food and thinking about where to start. Jingwan really had a feeling of being completely suppressed, unable to move. Then Wan, do you think they're worthy? Worthy. His voice was soft and low, as if it was the most sincere words of love. Jingwan couldn't stop goosebumps from rising all over her body. She didn't know if it was because of fear, or because of some kind of tremor, but her head involuntarily moved back, as if she couldn't bear it, and moved her body. Unfortunately, she couldn't escape the absolute control of the King of Hell. Wang hasn't answered me yet. Are they worthy? And what was called second sickness, this was it. It was clearly his own glorious deeds. And it was also his own agreement to settle accounts. Now he didn't allow others to say it, saying it would step on the reverse scale. Jingwan chuckled and reached out to hook his neck. Of course they're not worthy. In this world, other than me, who else can touch your body? You're mine, and you can only be mine. Whoever dares to move, whoever dares to come close, I'll take their life. As she said this, she suddenly pushed Li Hongyuan back, lifted her leg, and straddled his waist, pressing him down on the couch. Her hands were on his collar, and she slowly pulled it to both sides. She leaned over and kissed him on the lips, following the corner of his mouth, along his cheek, all the way to the side of his neck. Mine! His mental illness had acted up, and she couldn't escape no matter what. Since that was the case, she might as well do it herself. Anyway, Jingwan was also inexplicably moved. However, this smoothing action was too smooth, and it was already full of skill points. This was like the reversal of roles, and this perverted lunatic only felt abnormally happy. It was as if every pore on his body was relaxed, and his entire body was moaning inside and out. He liked to control everything about Jingwan, and vice versa. He also liked to be controlled by his true love. The most intimate contact was not only pleasurable to the body, but also to the soul. And the final result was that Jingwan delivered herself to him, and was eaten clean by him. She didn't have much time to take the initiative. It wasn't that a certain someone didn't want to cooperate, but that he didn't have the ability to do so. Too extreme pleasure in a short period of time. This had never happened before. Li Hongyuan was also worried that Jingwan wouldn't be able to take it, so he restrained himself. Usually, he wouldn't go overboard, and if he did, he would at least rest for a few days. This time he really went overboard. When Jingwan was carried down from the carriage by Li Hongyuan, the carriage had already stopped in the prince's mansion. It was very close to the main courtyard, and the horses had all been unloaded. The surroundings were also very quiet, and almost no sound could be heard. The sunset in the sky was almost dim. Jingwan was wrapped tightly in a blanket by Li Hongyuan, but his clothes were very casual. The chest area was wide open, and the marks on it were abnormally obvious. Casual, decadent, and satisfied, coupled with that incomparably handsome face. It was even more seductive than usual. Even the group of servant girls who didn't have any thoughts about him couldn't help but blush, and their hearts beat faster. They all lowered their heads, not daring to look at him. Not to mention them, even the bodyguards, even the shadow guards who could be said to have severed all 7 emotions and 6 desires, seemed to be affected by the atmosphere, and were somewhat restless. Jingwan's mind was blank. Someone seemed to have not recovered from his illness yesterday, and today he came again. It seemed that his illness was getting worse and worse. Speaking of which, it was not her who made the debts, but she had lost so much. How miserable it was if she hadn't settled the accounts. Jingwan's last thought was that anyway, it was better to settle the accounts as soon as possible. As for some other things that she still wanted to ask, such as about Wan Fangfei, she had long forgotten them. The next day, Jingwan seemed to be in good spirits, but she didn't do morning exercises, which was enough to prove that she was still a little weak. After tidying up, she went to Great Elder Princess's mansion in a mighty manner. Because of her identity, she didn't wear formal clothes, but used the prince's ceremonial garb. Great Elder Princess accepted the large number of gifts from Jingwan calmly. After all, these things were nothing to her. Great Elder Princess looked at her adopted daughter, who had grown taller and more beautiful. What's more, because she was married, she had a charm that girls didn't have. She was elegant, dignified, generous, and calm. Although not every man would like this type of woman, once he liked her, it would be difficult for him to let her go. No wonder Li Hongyuan, a playboy, could be attracted to her. But at this moment, Great Elder Princess's eyes were a little strange. Foster mother, why are you looking at me like this? Is there something on my face? Jingwan touched her face in confusion. Great Elder Princess smiled and said, I heard that you sent a person to Great Elder Princess's mansion yesterday? Jingwan instantly understood what was going on. So, that maidservant is Great Elder Princess's maid? If so, maybe I should go and have tea with Great Elder Princess. Great Elder Princess was naturally Lu Qingdi's eldest daughter, who was 2 or 3 years older than Li Hongyuan. However, because her biological mother was just a palace maid, she didn't have a high status even though she gave birth to Great Elder Princess. Her husband was also the son of an aristocratic family, but he was the kind of favored son. He was a playboy. Although he was nearly 30 years old, he didn't have a fixed character. He liked to play with cats and dogs and was lustful. Yesterday, he directly asked Li Hongyuan for the maidservant. Because the eldest princess was not favored, no one supported her. Not to mention controlling the prince consort, she was actually a punching bag. Her prince consort often said that it was because of her that his future was ruined, so it was natural that he treated her badly. In fact, he was just mud that couldn't be supported. Because he had a princess wife, he blamed everything on the eldest princess, giving him a perfect excuse to lead a drunken life. However, his family members still believed that it was true. He used Great Elder Princess's money to go to brothels and hire actresses. He used Great Elder Princess's house to raise concubines and concubines' children. Great Elder Princess emptied her private property for him. But he didn't get anything good. Jingwan knew these things before she married Li Hongyuan. She naturally hated that kind of man very much. She was also angry at Great Elder Princess. After all, Great Elder Princess was a princess. Not to mention her biological mother. Half of her blood was His Majesty's blood. If she made a scene, His Majesty would not ignore it for the sake of his face. In the final analysis, she was too soft-hearted. She had someone to rely on, but she was bullied by others. However, although Great Elder Princess was her husband's sister, they were not close to each other at all. If there were no acquaintances present, Li Hongyuan might not know who Great Elder Princess was. In this case, no one would meddle in other people's business. However, maybe she could take this opportunity to teach Great Elder Princess's husband a lesson. She just couldn't stand it. Great Elder Princess was speechless. Her daughter's idea was too unusual. It had been such a short time, but she had already caused a stir in the city. She still wanted to have tea with Great Elder Princess? Do you know what kind of rumors have spread about you? Jingwan smiled indifferently. She is just a jealous woman with a vicious heart. To be more serious, She doesn't deserve to be a royal wife. Before I left the capital for Jiangnan, there were already such signs. Isn't it enough? People say that you are clever, but I think you are heartless. Great Elder Princess was a little exasperated. Besides, since you know the consequences, why did you do it? You are just a bitch. There are many ways to deal with you. Why did you do it in public? You even said that you would throw away the moat. Aren't you deliberately exposing yourself to gossip? How could you do such a stupid thing? Foster mother, don't worry. It doesn't matter. No matter what others say, as long as Prince doesn't say anything, no one can do anything to me. After all, even if it was the emperor, it seems that he wouldn't dare to gamble on whether or not he could find a daughter-in-law who matches Jin Qinhuang's 8 characters. Besides, our Wang Ye is just an idle person, so what if his Wang Fei's moral character is lacking? Jingwan really didn't care about reputation. With her husband's support, she didn't have to worry about the emperor at all. As for why I did it, foster mother, I was forced to do it. Do you believe it? She showed a little grievance. Great Elder Princess didn't even care about her manners, and directly rolled her eyes at her. It showed what Great Elder Princess was thinking. Jingwan sighed in her heart. It was obvious that she was telling the truth, but why didn't anyone believe her? If she hadn't been forced, she wouldn't have taken Prince Jin's life in that case, without caring about reputation. All right, I can't be bothered to explain it to you. It's fine as long as you know what you're doing. However, allow me to remind you that you shouldn't go overboard. Hung Yuan hasn't said anything yet, and that's because he still treats you well. However, if he were to change his mind in the future, everything that you've done today would be a huge mistake. By then, you'll be the one to suffer. Thank you, foster mother. I know. Don't go too far. The worst was still to come. Jingwan wiped her tears for herself. Jingwan couldn't be 100% sure that Li Hongyuan wouldn't change his mind, but it was really unnecessary to worry about it in the future. It was purely asking for trouble. She just needed to believe in him now. In addition, this matter spread too quickly. If no one added fuel to the fire, it wouldn't be like this. I even suspect that there was someone deliberately plotting this. Otherwise, it's one thing for a lowly servant to be shameless. But how could she have the guts to do such a thing that would make her master lose face? That person might be dead by now. What Great Elder Princess thought of, Jingwan naturally also thought of. Foster mother, you probably have heard about what happened in Jiangnan. I amassed a lot of money in Jiangnan. I just don't know whether they came for Prince Jin, and happened to come for me, or they came for me in the first place. You amassed a lot of money, because of His Majesty? Great Elder Princess thought that she knew Jingwan to some extent, and according to the financial resources of Prince Jin's mansion, it was really unnecessary. You are wise, foster mother, Jingwan admitted generously. Then it's okay. Because of His Majesty, you are stigmatized. Based on my understanding of His Majesty, if someone dares to do anything to you at this time, he will definitely protect you. Yes. It's more troublesome if the King of Hell finds fault with me. After all, whether it's me or Prince Jin, he will lose face. Prince Jin is not a person who will suffer losses. I've worried for nothing. Thinking of Li Hongyuan's temper and virtue, Great Elder Princess couldn't help having a headache. It was good enough that he didn't make trouble for others. Those who rushed to make trouble for him were either out of their minds or out of their minds. Then, they talked about the scenery in Jiangnan as usual. Speaking of which, Great Elder Princess had also been to Jiangnan. At this time, she was more nostalgic about it. Sister Wan, you are finally back? Hearing the voice before seeing the person, it was none other than old Mistress Yu Yao. It seems that Yu Yao came back earlier than expected. When Jingwan entered Great Elder Princess's mansion, she heard from Great Elder Princess that Yu Yao went back to the main residence of the Jiang family with her brother, and happened to come back today. It was either noon or the next day. What a coincidence. Hearing this, Great Elder Princess also smiled. She didn't want to say anything about the daughter of her superior, who had been led astray. Her son didn't become an official, so she didn't want to say anything. Only this young daughter seemed to be good in all aspects now, which was a great comfort. Yuya rushed in hurriedly. When she saw her mother, She realized that she had forgotten herself. She stood properly and said, "Mother, pay my respects to you." "Mother, I'm back." Great Elder Princess nodded and didn't get angry. Old Mistress Yuyao looked relieved and secretly stuck out her little tongue. She thought that others didn't see it, but in fact, Great Elder Princess and Jingwan saw it clearly. Both of them burst into laughter. Yuyao turned to Jingwan and said, "Sister Wan, I miss you so much. You have been in Jiangnan for so long." Jingwan held Yuyao in her arms and said, "I also miss Yuyao. Our Yuyao has grown taller and is about to become a big girl." "Isn't she about to become a big girl? I already look like a big girl." Yuyao stuck out her small chest and said, "Yes, yes, yes." Then some people came in. Obviously, they were Yuyao's companions. There were 2 couples and their children, 4 adults and 3 children. Compared with Yuyao, these people were much more well-behaved. The 2 men were graceful and well-behaved, while the 2 young women were a little reserved. It was okay in ordinary families, but in Great Elder Princess's mansion, they seemed to be a little unpresentable. However, Jingwan also saw that because Great Elder Princess didn't like them, they were a little afraid of Great Elder Princess. Naturally, Great Elder Princess was more unhappy. It was simply a vicious circle, and the children seemed to be a little bit like their mother. Jingwan's status was obvious, so they saluted her again. Jingwan nodded and asked them to be excused. "Prince Jean is also in the mansion. Your father is accompanying him to the outer study. You 2 brothers can go and have a look." "Yes, mother. We'll take our leave." The 2 brothers left one after another. Without the backbone, Jingwan felt that the remaining people were a little pitiful. In fact, Great Elder Princess was not a fierce person. Did she have to be like this? Great Elder Princess frowned again, but she didn't lose her temper in the end. "Princess Jean brought back a lot of good things from the south of the Yangtze River for me. There are a lot of things. You can take some back by yourselves." "Yes, thank you, mother." Great Elder Princess waved her hand and sent them away impatiently. After they left, she sighed to Jingwan. "I don't know whether it's right or wrong to choose such a daughter-in-law." In order to reassure the emperor, Great Elder Princess chose daughters-in-law from small families, who were naturally not presentable in her eyes. Jingwan didn't answer. Everything was like drinking water. Only people knew whether it was hot or cold. As the saying went, if you were willing to give up, you would get something. However, obviously Great Elder Princess didn't want to get an answer from Jingwan. "Sister, did you bring me a gift?" Yuyao shook Jingwan's hand and asked coquettishly, "How can I not bring you a gift? You are becoming more and more unruly." Great Elder Princess scolded softly. Yuyao knew that her mother wasn't really angry, so she wasn't afraid at all. "What did you give me?" "Mother, can I go and have a look now?" Go, go. You are making my head ache here." Great Elder Princess said with disdain. Yuyao walked away with a smile and ran away as soon as she was out of her mother's sight. "They are all debt collectors." Great Elder Princess rubbed her temples, but there was a smile at the corner of her mouth. Children are not all debt collectors of their parents. Generation after generation, they first collect debts from their parents, and then their children collect debts from them. No one can escape from it. Yes. Jingwan, what about you? Is there any good news in your belly? Great Elder Princess's eyes naturally fell on Jingwan's belly. Under such circumstances, unless one was like Sun Yijia, who got pregnant after getting married, they would definitely be urged to get pregnant. No one could escape. It's fate to have a child. Let nature take its course. Of course, she couldn't tell Great Elder Princess the truth. Later, Great Elder Princess wanted to ask her to stay for dinner, but the Imperial Palace suddenly summoned Li Hongyuan. Before Li Hongyuan left, he sent someone to ask Jingwan. Jingwan directly got up and left. Great Elder Princess didn't ask her to stay. Even if Li Hongyuan was an idle prince, Great Elder Princess wouldn't interfere in the affairs of the imperial court. After all, it was a special period. White could be smeared black, so it was better to be careful. At the gate of Great Elder Princess's mansion, Jingwan and Li Hongyuan parted ways. One went to the imperial palace, while the other went back to the prince's mansion. Li Hongyuan left most of the guards of honor to Jingwan, and he went directly on his horse. In Jingwan's opinion, It was mostly about the matter in Jiangnan. As long as the final result was not out, Prince Jin, as an imperial envoy, was the kind of imperial envoy who left other officials aside. It was impossible for him to refuse to do it. Although he could disobey Emperor Lucheng, there should be a limit. It would be bad if Emperor Lucheng issued an imperial edict to invite him. Jingwan sat in the carriage, slightly closed her eyes, and fiddled with the Buddha beads on her left wrist with her right hand, thinking about something. There were some things that Li Hongyuan didn't say clearly, but Jingwan could feel the tension from some of the letters. Even if she knew that Li Hongyuan had great power, and it was not easy for him to get the throne, she still couldn't help worrying about him. As long as the dust didn't settle, she couldn't do anything for him, and she couldn't drag him down. There was the sound of hurried horse hooves, followed by the neighing of the horse, and the carriage suddenly shook. Because of inertia, Jingwan directly hit the wall of the carriage, and it soon came to a complete stop. Jingwan rubbed her aching arm. What happened? Someone rode a horse and hit the carriage, disturbing Wang Fei. Asking Wang Fei for forgiveness. An Yi's voice came from outside the window. Jingwan's brows slightly moved. Daring to ride a horse in the capital, Jingwan had to say good guts. But daring to hit the guard of honor of the living king of hell, that was equivalent to eating 100 bears' heart and leopard's guts. Ask clearly who it is. If it's an emergency, let the other party take the responsibility of riding a horse and receive the punishment himself. If it's deliberately riding a horse, take the person and hand it over to the governor's office to deal with according to the law. Obviously, no matter what the situation was, Jingwan didn't intend to pursue the matter when she was hit. Jingwan didn't pursue the matter, but An Yi and the others didn't necessarily not pursue the matter. Offending Wang Fei wasn't a small matter, so how could they not pursue the matter? Later, when their master pursued the matter, they would all be punished. It was originally fine, but disaster simply fell from the sky. However, right now whatever Wang Fei said was what it was. Was this obeying on the surface but opposing on the inside? Absolutely not. Jingwan prepared to continue to close her eyes and rest, but outside. Do you know who this young master is? Jingwan sighed in her heart. With this standard tone of a hedonistic little tyrant, she knew that this matter couldn't be settled peacefully. He had to use his power to bully people. However, it was clear that the other party didn't live in the capital, but they definitely had power and influence. Otherwise, how could they dare to be arrogant in front of the living king of hell? Leaving it for consideration, Jingwan was 80 to 90% sure of the other party's identity. Leaning over, she slightly lifted the curtain of the window and looked outside. There were 7 or 8 strong guards with a deep murderous aura. At a glance, one could tell that they were soldiers who had experienced hundreds of battles. This kind of person should be respected for protecting the country. But now they were being driven by the little tyrant. Moreover, for her husband's face, she couldn't back down. Jingwan put down the curtain and sat quietly, letting An Yi and the others deal with it. As expected, a conflict immediately broke out between the two sides. At this time, Mama Gong also lifted the curtain and came in. Firstly, she was worried that the horses outside would be startled again. Secondly, Mama Gong heard the noise just now and was 100% sure that Jingwan had been hit. She was worried and wanted to take a look. Jingwan wasn't surprised. Mama Gong had always been careful and didn't hide anything. She directly rolled up her sleeves. No one thought that an accident would happen. Because she was caught off guard, the hit wasn't light and a large bruise appeared on her arm. Mama Gong frowned and took out medicine from a hidden box in the carriage. She applied it on Jingwan's arm and rubbed it. This pain wasn't unbearable. Your Highness, you should already know the other party's identity, right? Mama Gong asked softly. Yes. The He family has been guarding the northeast since 50 years ago. Now it's the 3rd generation. They have 100,000 soldiers and are known as the Northeast Army. They are like the stabilizing force of Qi Yuan in the northeast. Unlike other generals, the He family lives in the northeast border town and returns to the capital every 3 years to report on their work. As far as I know, in the past years, it was the commander-in-chief who came back with about 100 people. This year, It seems that even his family members have come back? Was there something unknown about this? No matter who it is, His Highness won't let them go if they hurt Her Highness. Jingwan was silent. This was an obvious thing. If it was really an accident, she would say a few words to persuade him. But obviously it wasn't. This little tyrant was used to being arrogant. In the northeast border town, his family was the boss, equivalent to the local tyrant. Naturally, no one dared to do anything to him. Even in the capital, he had the capital to be arrogant. However, he was no longer at the top of the pyramid. If he ran into the hands of the King of Hell, it was like running into an iron plate. Even if he didn't die, he would lose a layer of skin. Logically speaking, the other party was a real fierce army. The guards of the prince's residence were carefully selected, so they couldn't be compared. And the others couldn't show their full strength in order to avoid being exposed. However, who told Jingwan to have more people on her side? Moreover, during the training, several people worked together. It took a long time, but the final result didn't change. That little tyrant still wanted to clamor, but his mouth was blocked. Your Highness, how should we deal with these people? And he didn't directly send them to the capital government, but asked again. https://11/11807/66540665. Mobile edition. Chapter 368. Bring them back to the Wangfu. When Wang Ye returns, let General He come to the Wangfu to pick them up. Some people were not taught a profound lesson, and would never know their mistakes. Yes. And he answered and waved his hand. The Wangfu's bodyguards stepped forward, one person each, with a knife on their neck. They could either walk on their own, or directly knock them out and take them away. Moreover, it was very clear that if they were knocked out, the integrity of their bodies would not be guaranteed. As for that little overlord, he personally took care of him. Following that, the road was more spectacular. But most people's reaction was, which family didn't have eyes to provoke Jin Wangya? This was an old man wanting to hang himself, disliking that his life was too long. Since Jingwan said to hand it over to Li Hongyuan to handle, naturally she wouldn't go see that little overlord. She only instructed and the others to watch over them, and not touch them for the time being. When Li Hongyuan returned from the palace, it was already afternoon, but Jingwan had just finished her lunch. Li Hongyuan was chased and intercepted by a group of old men in the palace, wanting to know more about Jiangnan. Li Hongyuan was annoyed by them, and his mood naturally became unhappy. In the end, he was completely impatient. Yu Zhongqing basically knew everything, and the matter of going out to investigate and arrest was Li Suyan's responsibility. Don't look for him again. Even if he asked again, he wouldn't say a word. It was not good for him to make a move on this group of old men. But in their family, there were some who could take a beating. With such a blatant threat, this group of old officials could only pinch their noses and not utter a word. After the wrangling, it was almost time for lunch. Lu Qingdi let Li Hongyuan accompany him to eat. Then, Lu Qingdi mentioned the matter of Gui Fei Su to Li Hongyuan. Imperial concubine, Su naturally didn't dare to tell Lu Qingdi the real reason for the estrangement between mother and son. She only said that there was some misunderstanding between them. Yuan thought that she cared more about her son, so he got angry and refused to talk to her. Imperial concubine Su was very haggard these 2 days, and her eyes were also red. It seemed that she had cried a lot. Lu Qingdi didn't think about what happened in Jiangnan, because Yu Zhongqing was there. Yu Zhongqing was his confidant. If Li Hongyuan hid something from Li Hongming, as long as he compared it with Yu Zhongqing, it would be clear. In fact, Yu Zhongqing's situation was the same as that of Li Hongyuan's Cheng Bing. So Lu Qingdi easily believed Imperial Consort Su's words. Lu Qingdi didn't know that Yu Zhongqing and Cheng Bing's things were all prepared by him beforehand. Therefore, from the beginning, Li Hongyuan had concealed part of Li Hongming's information. He was also certain that as long as he gave Imperial concubine Su a chance, she would open her mouth to plead for leniency. Everything was within his expectations. He had the advantage of time and place. When it came to implementation, people were also on his side. Lu Qingdi wanted to be the peacemaker, and let the misunderstanding between mother and son be resolved. Naturally, it would be good for you, good for me, and good for everyone. She even painstakingly advised him. For so many years, his imperial concubine mother was clearly impartial. Sometimes she even doted on him a little. What did she say about being a biological son? Wasn't that purely hurting his imperial concubine mother's heart? Li Hongyuan's expression became colder and colder. It seemed that he was going to contradict Le Qingdi again. But for some reason, he finally endured it. Finally, Imperial father, please tell my imperial concubine mother to take good care of her health. Son will pay her respects in a few days. Since you still care about your imperial concubine mother's health, why don't you go now? Once she sees you, the misunderstanding will be resolved, and she will naturally be fine. It would have been better if he didn't say it. As soon as he said it, Li Hongyuan's eyes even appeared ruthless. I won't go. Le Qingdi naturally wasn't afraid of Li Hongyuan. On the contrary, he was a little surprised and curious at this moment. Although on the surface, there wasn't any difference when he contradicted him in the past, he felt that he was as stubborn as a calf. This was really something new to this son. So was he really angry? You must go. This is an imperial edict. Li Hongyuan's face was gloomy as he stared at Le Qingdi. Then, he picked up his chopsticks and got up to leave. There were dozens of imperial dishes on the table, but he didn't eat much. Imperial concubine Su didn't eat anything, and was resting on the couch with her eyes closed. When she heard that Li Hongyuan had come, she quickly got up with a face full of joy. When Li Hongyuan entered, and was about to greet him, Imperial concubine Su had already walked up to him, and grabbed his arm. Yuan, there's no need to be so polite. Yuan, are you still angry with Imperial concubine mother? She was very careful and her grip was quite strong, as if she was afraid that Li Hongyuan would turn around and leave. Li Hongyuan tried to pull his arm away but failed. He glanced at her hand. It was well maintained and her nails were a little long. If he really used force, her nails might break. Imperial concubine Su saw this, and was happy in her heart. Her son really did care about her. You were eating with your imperial father. Why did you come over now? You must not have eaten anything. I'll have the small kitchen prepare some food. You're a big man, so it's impossible for you not to eat. Servants. Imperial mother, there's no need. How can you not eat? As the saying goes, I don't want to eat. I'm not hungry. I have no appetite. Li Hongyuan interrupted her, appearing rather impolite. Then, he saw Imperial concubine Su's somewhat startled expression, and a trace of annoyance flashed across his face. He blamed himself, but refused to apologize in a fit of pique. Imperial concubine Su laughed. If there's no need, then there's no need. You're a big man. It's fine to eat 1 or 2 meals. Li Hongyuan looked away. Imperial mother, if you have something to say, just say it. This son still has something to do. What could Li Hongyuan have to do? In Imperial concubine Su's eyes, he was still angry. Then sit down and talk. There's no need. Thinking about it, some things can be solved with just a few words. Imperial concubine Su was helpless. Some things couldn't be explained clearly, and would only make things worse. After some consideration, she mentioned Yu Zhongqing and Le Qingdi without the slightest doubt. Yuan, you've already made arrangements? Imperial concubine Su faintly revealed some disbelief. Li Hongyuan looked at her, and then reached out. He firmly but subconsciously cautiously brushed Imperial concubine Su's hand away. His face was cold and hard. Imperial mother, you didn't think this son would do these things from the beginning, right? I don't get along with Li Hongming, and I don't get along with all my brothers. However, Li Hongming is your son. If his situation is too bad, you will definitely be worried, and you won't be able to sleep at night. After all, this isn't like those small fights in the past. Then, do you want me to just watch and do nothing? This son erased some things when I was in Jiangnan. Or do you think that with Yu Zhongqing by your side at all times, everything is transparent in his eyes? Am I that incompetent? Imperial concubine Su definitely didn't expect this layer of relationship. However, after thinking about it for a moment, she should know that it wasn't impossible. It was inevitable. Yuan had always been a filial child, but she had completely neglected him. To a certain extent, wasn't it also a kind of denial to him? No wonder he was so angry. Imperial concubine Su's heart was stifled, and she could only shake her head to deny it. No. However, there were more things that she couldn't say. Yuan-er, why didn't you tell Imperial Mother earlier? Tell you? Why should I tell you earlier? Li Hongyuan's coldness seemed to contain a trace of stubbornness. If I told you, would you hide it from him? Then let Li Hongming be grateful to this son? There's no need. This son didn't do it for him. Then, would you also thank this son for him? Imperial concubine Su seemed to understand this time. They had been at odds since they were young. Now that he suddenly did something for the other party, no matter what the consideration was, the other party would express gratitude. Then, the way they got along in the past would be broken. In this way, perhaps both parties would feel uncomfortable and simply say nothing. Anyway, as Yuan-er said, he didn't do it for Ming-er. In the end, it was because he felt uncomfortable in his heart. She understood, but she couldn't say it out loud. Especially the last sentence, because he was really right. In this, it seemed that he didn't consider her feelings. As a mother, she didn't think much of it. But the truth was that as a mother, she thanked her adopted son for her son. Yuan-er thought of everything and didn't want to see such a scene, so he chose not to say anything. In the end, she was the one who opened her mouth to plead first, creating a gap between mother and son. When she pleaded for mercy, the pain in her son's heart was probably countless times worse than expected. Imperial concubine Su's body and lips trembled, but she couldn't say anything, because no matter what, she had already done the wrong thing. And Yuan-er's heart was already hurt. If she said too much, it might cause him to rebel in his heart, and think that she was really biased. Li Hongyuan lowered his head. Mother, this son won't be entering the palace to pay respects for a while. This son needs to calm down. Please forgive this son. This son will take his leave. Imperial concubine Su could only watch Li Hongyuan's back as he left, seemingly lonely and sad. She wanted to dissolve the estrangement but failed. Instead, the estrangement deepened. Imperial concubine Su hadn't eaten or slept well in the past 2 or 3 days. At this moment, she felt her blood rush up and her head spin. Her body went limp, and she fell to the ground. Imperial concubine, her trusted maid, hurried forward. Someone, quickly call the imperial physician. What imperial physician? Don't call him. Help this concubine up. I'll be fine after lying on the bed for a while. If she fell ill when her son came, wouldn't her son be accused of being unfilial? Although her son's reputation wasn't good, he shouldn't be accused of being unfilial, especially since she was the one who brought it upon him. The maid didn't dare to disobey her, and hurriedly helped her up. Imperial concubine, how about this servant go and ask the prince to come back? You're not allowed to go. He's already sad. Seeing this concubine like this, he should blame himself and feel guilty. This concubine was originally in the wrong this time. Provincial governor, don't make it public. When the imperial physician checks my pulse in 2 days, just have him secretly prescribe some medicine. Imperial concubine Su rubbed her temples, revealing her weakness and exhaustion. Imperial concubine Su was both physically and mentally exhausted. It wasn't only because of Li Hongyuan's matter, but also because Jingwan's disheveled appearance the day before yesterday, as well as her capable aunt being beaten to death. The imperial concubines who came to her palace to comfort her came in droves. Some praised her openly, while others sneered and ridiculed her. Of course, none of them really dared to point their fingers at her face. In reality, this wasn't a big deal to her. If she couldn't even endure this, how could she have a foothold in the harem? Imperial concubine Su refused to call for an imperial physician, so she could only deal with the health pills she usually ate. After leaving the Jade Essence Palace, he actually heard the slight chaos. But what did that have to do with him? He looked back, then brushed the place where Imperial concubine Su had grabbed, as if brushing away something dirty. Then he directly left the palace. On the way back to the main courtyard, Li Hongyuan already knew that Jingwan had been bumped into. Not only had the horse been startled, the carriage had almost flipped over. Although the guards outside reacted quickly and managed to control the carriage, Jingwan had still been injured. In the blink of an eye, Li Hongyuan's body was shrouded in hostility. Go and receive your punishment. 50 lashes each. Yes. And he replied. He didn't dare and wouldn't have any meaning. Has the He family's people already arrived at the residence? Yes, but Wang Fei said to wait for Wang Ye to come back to deal with it, so she didn't let the He family's people in. Although the He family's people temporarily left, they should have left people near the residence. Seeing that master has returned, they should come again soon. When this prince entered the palace, I met with General He. Go break his arms and legs. If the He family's people come again, block them for this prince. Yes. Jingwan was a little surprised to see Li Hongyuan at this time. Because she was alone, she ate relatively quickly. The people in the palace should still be eating at this time. Jingwan didn't think too much about it. She just ordered the servants to prepare some food. It didn't need to be too sumptuous, but it had to be fast. Li Hongyuan didn't have an appetite and didn't want to eat. I'm sorry, but I'm really hungry now. While waiting for the food, Li Hongyuan hugged Jingwan and kissed her. Jingwan didn't push him away. After being married for more than half a year, she guessed that this man was not only crazy, but also had skin thirst. The longer they were separated, the more clingy he became. However, this kind of situation only happened to her. Moreover, this man really was a bit of a neat freak. Because he wanted to settle accounts with her. In order to settle accounts as soon as possible, Jingwan did some research on his past. The best person to find out was naturally Eunuch Mu. Therefore, when Eunuch Mu came back to report the news, Jingwan asked him. In order to create a strong and loyal image for the male master in front of the female master, Eunuch Mu naturally told her everything he knew. Li Hongyuan didn't like being served. He basically did the daily bathing and dressing himself. Occasionally, he would ask someone to wipe his back. The only thing he needed others to take care of was his hair. From a long time ago, it was Eunuch Mu who did this. The palace maids and maids couldn't get close to him at all. Every time Eunuch Mu did it, he had to wash himself clean first. If he was dissatisfied with anything, he would be in trouble. It was true that Li Hongyuan doted on them for 7 days. And it was also true that many women loved Li Hongyuan so much that they fell deeply in love with him. However, Wang Yi did not even touch a single one of them. Those who lasted for 7 days were all relatively special women. They were basically acting in concert with Li Hongyuan to make outsiders believe that Li Hongyuan was indeed lustful. At the same time, it also balanced the women who stayed by Li Hongyuan's side for 1 or 2 days, so that no one would suspect that Li Hongyuan did not touch any of them. According to Eunuch Mu, the prince disliked those women because they were dirty. When they were close to him, their breaths were dirty. After knowing this, Jingwan touched her chin. She really couldn't believe it. Her husband's virginity might have been ended by her. Although she didn't directly ask Eunuch Mu such a question, Jingwan could almost come to this conclusion. Eunuch Mu was 7 or 8 years older than Li Hongyuan. He had been with Li Hongyuan since he was 5 or 6 years old. No one knew more about Li Hongyuan's private affairs than he did. It was no wonder that Jingwan was so surprised. Putting aside Li Hongyuan's skill in flirting, and the way he did it in bed at the beginning, he was clearly a master among masters. He didn't seem like someone who had never tasted the taste of sex before. However, from Muan's point of view, it seemed that he didn't need to tell such a lie. After all, no matter how dissolute and absurd a man was before marriage, as long as he didn't have anyone except his wife by his side after marriage, he could be regarded as a first-class man in a woman's eyes. Except for her, no one would feel a little uncomfortable. Before the princess got married, she would specially send a maid to test the marriage. Eunuch Mu must have the same idea. There was no need to make up a lie that Li Hongyuan had never touched a woman. So someone was just gifted. He was so fierce and energetic in bed. In fact, it was because he had been accumulating it for a long time. Jingwan patted her head. She didn't pay attention to it and got it dirty. However, Jingwan was really happy about this. She didn't even notice that the little discomfort buried deep in her heart had disappeared without a trace. Therefore, when Li Hongyuan was intimate with her at this moment, she just let him be. Even when the maid came in and out, she didn't push him away. Li Hongyuan's eyes flashed slightly. What he once understood was from the words of the shadow guards, and what he knew was from her appearance. Now he understood her heart more and more. Now he was almost certain that something must have happened during the time he was not around. It was obviously a good thing for him. After that, during the meal, Jingwan kept putting food into his bowl with a smile. Sometimes she even fed him directly. Li Hongyuan directly held her in his arms. Jingwan didn't object and fed him naturally. Li Hongyuan thought that she would be willing to feed him mouth to mouth. He glanced at the maid, who lowered her head and wished she could shrink her head into her stomach. Li Hongyuan didn't do that in the end. Perhaps from now on, he didn't need to deliberately train her. Wan's awareness would be deeply ingrained in her bones. Li Hongyuan's stomach was full, and his heart was satisfied. Jingwan wanted to take a nap, and Li Hongyuan also accompanied her. When she fell asleep, he got up and called Nanny Gong and Eunuch Mu. After asking, he got the answer. Li Hongyuan couldn't help laughing. How could this be described as a vinegar jar? It was clearly a sea of vinegar. She was so happy just because he hadn't touched other women before. Her possessiveness wanted the unity of body and mind. She wanted everything. If one was missing, she would probably abandon it like a worn-out shoe. In this life, Li Hongyuan had kept his chastity not only because he knew that Jingwan cared about this aspect. In fact, in his previous life, his desires had been relatively indifferent. Because he was a prince, he was like most men. He had never cared about other women's feelings, let alone serve them wholeheartedly. As long as he was satisfied, it was fine. In reality, other than certain places that they had to touch, including his princess consort, it seemed that they didn't have much intimate contact with him. After a certain amount of time, they would naturally separate. There was not a single exception. Because he was gifted, every time he slept with them, they were very unwilling to get close to him. They were even a little afraid because he was too ruthless and brought them only pain and no pleasure. They suffered every time. Anyone would be unhappy. They were unhappy, and Li Hongyuan was naturally disdainful. They just wanted a child and tried their best to seduce him. Haha, what kind of person did they think Li Hongyuan was? Therefore, those women were no different from the cold palace. Later, when he became the emperor, he was first in the chaos of war. After the country stabilized, his health gradually deteriorated. The number of times he entered the harem could be counted on one's fingers. Moreover, he felt bored in bed. Thinking about the only night with Jingwan, he could have some fun. In the last few years, he didn't enter the harem at all. As for the empress, who the hell was that? Except for consort Xian, who was in charge of the harem, there was no other woman above the rank of consort. The court officials knew about his health condition, and he was known as a tyrant. There were only a few women in his harem, and no one dared to say a word. The influence of that time seemed to be carried over to this life, and some situations naturally became more and more serious. In the end, it wasn't that other women might have traumatized him, but that Jingwan left a deep impression in his heart. A man's passion and desire were separate. When it came to him, they couldn't be separated. https://11/11807/6654071. We will handle it as soon as possible. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.